So welcome to the Financial Aid Train the Trainer. Now everyone should be able to see the screens. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. And that way we have staff here who are going to be reading your questions throughout the presentation. You don't have to wait till our question and answer section to ask those questions. We just want to make sure that we know if you have a question, there might be colleagues who have similar questions, and we want to be able to record those questions in our presentation today. So with the Washington Student Achievement Council, we have, what, about 120 employees-ish? So we're a smaller state agency right here in Olympia. And we have some pretty big attainment goals here. And so for Washingtonians aged 25 to 44, our attainment goals are that we want 100% of them to have a high school diploma or equivalent, as well as 70% of them having a post-secondary credential. And that's important not just for students to be able to have access to livable wage jobs, but for the economy and viability of Washington State. And these are attainment goals through 2024. So why are we having these webinars? Why are we having these trainings? Part of it is that nearly half of Washington seniors did not complete a financial aid application last year. So the Pollyanna and me would love to think that 44.5% of our students are independently wealthy and just went home and got straight cash for college. But we know that's not the case. We know that our students don't have that type of funding sources typically. And so part of it is students not applying, not knowing about the process, needing to be informed, having parents informed. And so part of the work in these workshops is for us to encourage people to be navigators of this process. Also, another statistic I want you to look at is the number of students who have submitted with errors. So when a student submits an application, if they have significant errors in that application or are missing signatures, it's going to be considered submitted with errors and not part of our completion numbers. That's a really easy way to increase our financial aid, is to work with those students who are maybe struggling with the completion of their application. So helping them get past the process all the way to successfully submitted. And so in Washington, we have created the AIM Higher Washington group. So for this work here, this is all of us. This is the work we're doing. Not one person is going to increase the financial aid achievement in Washington State. This is something that all of us are going to have to do by increasing our capacity through Train the Trainers and looking at strategic ways to do this work. So it's a combination of multiple groups and including other initiatives, including the 12th Year Campaign, those of you who might be familiar with. This is going to include outreach to students, parents, and local educators, and partnerships with educational groups and government leaders. And we have new tools that we're going to talk about today in the webinar, including a text messaging system for college-bound seniors. We're very excited about this work, but we know for us to hit these achievement goals, we're all going to have to work together. So in this work, we have a lot of people who are concerned about, like, I'm not an expert. Why would I do financial aid if I don't know every single thing possible? It's okay. You don't have to be an expert in this work, but we want you to be someone who can help. We want you to be a navigator. So you don't have to be an expert, but we want you to be able to navigate a student through this process. And when you've hit the capacity of your knowledge base, being able to refer them to someone to help them with the rest of it. So you don't have to know it all. You just have to know when you need to refer somebody to a financial aid office. So we're going to have a financial aid overview today. We're going to talk about our new awesome Washington College grant. We're going to talk about applying for financial aid, and then training, action planning, and your next steps. So financial aid is an umbrella. It's easier to remember it this way because a lot of families will think that financial aid is just one application. So you're just doing an application for the FAFSA or the WAFSA and you're done. And that doesn't really encompass all of the funding opportunities through financial aid. So we look at it in 4 major buckets. That's going to be grants, scholarships, loans, and work study. And we know that with the FAFSA, they are applying for grants, loans, and work study. And the WAFSA, they're doing grants, loans, and potentially state work study. Scholarships are a separate application. Now, for work study, students are confused on this opportunity. They see the words work and study together and they think it's a major bummer. Like, why would I want to work and study? I'm here to go to college. What they don't understand is that work study are amazing jobs. They provide opportunities for students to work while they're going to school and still have school be their focus, and at the same time expand their resume and look at opportunities. I know that there are probably people who are listening to this webinar right now who did work study and found it a very positive experience. I know for myself, it was a wonderful opportunity to be able to focus on my education and not have to deal with the challenges of being employed by an outside employer who occasionally would make me decide between going to school, missing a class, and picking up an extra shift. It was the first time I was fully supported as a student in my educational pursuits. And so I think students, when it comes to this process, they see this and think, I don't want to have to do that. But if they select on their financial aid application, they don't know if they want work study or no. Some schools will not consider them unless they just select yes. So if a student's thinking about working while going to school, I encourage them to select yes in the application for work study. When a student applies for the FAFSA, they're applying for federal and state funding, and that federal funding includes the Pell Grant, federal work study, unsubsidized and subsidized student loans. Unsubsidized student loans are student loans that you take out, and the minute that you take them out, your interest starts accruing. Subsidized student loans is where you take out the loan, and while you're in school, the government's going to subsidize the interest. So I always encourage students who are taking out loans, you want to make sure you're taking your subsidized before you take your unsubsidized. I see students take the wrong ones all the time. We have resources within 12th year and Gear Up that help students navigate the award letter process so that they select the correct funding sources, gift aid first, then subsidized loans, then unsubsidized loans. If a student is receiving an unsubsidized loan, I always encourage them, if you can, try to pay the interest down while you're going to school. That way you're starting with more principal payments versus full interest payments the first couple payments. Parent loans are loans that parents can take out. They are offered to parents. They are income-based. There is no limit on parent loans, which I think some people, it sounds amazing. Oh, there's no limit on these loans. I can take as much as I want. But you can also take as much as you want. And that can be a frightening prospect for parents who are coming into the payment process. So I had a parent call in that had over $200,000 in student loans through Parent Plus loans. And they were trying to figure out, how do I fund my third child to go to college? I already have these loans and I've lost my job. So they were ineligible now for additional parent loans, but they still owed on those parent loans. Those parent loans are very difficult to discharge in a bankruptcy process. Yes, so, what is the?
Not correct, parents do have a limit to COA?
They do, but they don't overall. The amount that they can take out over multiple years is not limited. So they are looking at their income as part of their cost of attendance. They do limit their cost of attendance, but if you have a parent taking Parent Plus loans for 4 children, they don't have a cap on the maximum amount that a parent can take out over those years. So it does add up. So when you have, that parent had students in private schools and they weren't looking at other funding sources. So the challenge there was the parent did not look at scholarships. Their student met all these amazing scholarship requirements for not just need-based, but also merit-based. And so the student didn't apply for scholarships, they just took loans out immediately. So they do max out at the cost of attendance, but multiple years can be added up and there's no cap there. Thank you for that clarification.
Melanie.
Thank you, Melanie, for the clarification. And if you have other questions, I'm always happy to clarify on there. But we want parents to be mindful of this process because I've literally had parents tell me, I'm going to wait until all my kids get out of college and then I'm just going to file for bankruptcy. And I read that NPR article about bankruptcy and student loans, and that article was very enlightening about the process of having to hire your own lawyers to get those discharged, and that it doesn't happen as frequently as some people would like to. So we want to make sure they have other financial plans to pay for school other than discharging their loans through bankruptcy. Those loans will follow you. I mean, we all know that because most of us have those loans. And then for Washington State financial aid, so when you apply for the FAFSA, you're applying for federal and state aid. And when you're applying for the WAFSA, you're applying for state aid. So when you apply for the WAFSA, you'll be applying for these funding sources, including the new Washington College Grant, formerly known as the State NEAT Grant, the College Bound Scholarship, state work study, passport to careers for our youth in care, and the opportunity grant. This also includes the washboard.org. The washboard.org is a scholarship warehouse. So they vet the scholarships and make sure this is a real scholarship. So they're vetted scholarships. The student builds a profile, including their GPA, things they're interested in, parents' organizations, things they belong to, and it matches them to the scholarships. I affectionately call it the eHarmony of scholarship websites, but it is probably better because they vet the scholarships. So I encourage students, instead of trying to go through a scholarship drawer at the school, like the first step, you can do this early on in your high school career, is to fill out a profile for the washboard. So the college-bound scholarship commitment. This is an early commitment of funds for students who are 7th or 8th grade. They need to apply by June 30th of their 8th grade year. This combines with other state funding, and it includes the cost of tuition at public rates. So if a student wants to go to a private college in Washington, they are going to get the highest public rate, which is usually University of Washington's research-based tuition rate. And then they're going to have to make up the difference. But there are private schools that are offering scholarships that cover the difference. So we encourage students to dream big. And it covers some fees and a small book allowance. This can be used at over 62 and 4-year public and private schools in Washington State. I encourage students, what we love about this program is it allows a student in 7th or 8th grade to apply for this. And I have students who will say, I got a scholarship already. So number one, now they're like, I want to apply. They get the scholarship bug where they're like, I want to apply for other scholarships. Number two, it allows them to really think about college early on. So instead of waiting until their senior year or junior year, they're able to think about college as an opportunity and their future before they start impacting their high school GPA. So it really allows them to dream big. Students in this process, they need to apply in middle school, and we did have some small amount of 9th graders that are eligible to apply that we've connected with the high schools. They know they're eligible, so you won't have to worry anything about that. But we had a small amount. They're going to need to meet the income requirements, and they need to meet those income requirements again when they're a senior in high school by applying for financial aid. If they're in foster care, they're auto-enrolled. We're getting a bunch of questions on there. And then step 2, they're going to fulfill the college-bound pledge. So they're going to graduate with a 2.0. They're going to graduate for Washington High School. They're going to meet their income requirements through completing a financial aid application that is critical for them. They need to be accepted to and attend an eligible college within a year of graduating from high school. They have 5 years to use 4 years of funding.
Those submitting FAFSA don't need to file a WAFA to receive Washington College Grant, correct?
Yes. So when you fill out the FAFSA, you're being considered for both state and federal funding, and the WAFSA is a separate application, but they only do one. We have students that will get really excited about, like, I got this much with the FAFSA, so now I'm going to apply for the WAFSA. They've already been considered for that state aid. So we just want them to do the application they're eligible for.
And what dates do eligible 7th graders have to abide by?
So the 7th graders, for college-bound. Do you want to jump in, Kiko?
So for college-bound, eligibility starts from the very first day of their 7th grade year, so whatever day the school year starts, and the students have until June 30th of their 8th grade year to start an application. That application must be completed before they enroll in 9th grade, so that hard deadline to complete the application is August 31st. So students have the entire window of the very first day they start 7th grade until June 30th of their 8th grade year to start the application, and then they have to complete that college-bound application by August 31st. So any questions about that, you can always reach out to the college-bound office, and we'd be happy to walk you through those little sticking points.
Thank you so much for your questions. So they need to be accepted to and attend an eligible college. So this is, they have a year to do that. So if you are working with students that have a gap year, that they want to take a gap year, that is awesome. You know, there's multiple reasons that students might be taking a gap year. What we want to make sure is it's just a gap year, not like a gap decade. We know gap years can turn into gap decades real quick. And so we want to make sure that the student has enrolled and that they're going to attend an eligible school. So they know they need to come back from whatever they're doing, whether it's service and be able to attend school so they can utilize that scholarship.
Who should we connect with to ensure foster youth are auto-enrolled and college-bound?
So they're going to connect with the college-bound office to make sure.
Are parents still required to sign the college-bound application, or can students apply without parent support?
This is a little bit longer than a quick question.
So for college-bound students, the parent or guardian must sign for eligibility to maintain eligibility. So students and the parent have to sign, or the guardian in that instance. I want to make sure. There is an instance in which the parent is not responding that a counselor signature form can be used for those students to complete the college-bound application. I want to be very clear that this counselor signature form can be used by any person who is doing college-bound application completion. So that could be someone working in the school, that could be somebody in the district, but it has to be in the instance that after multiple attempts, after the application has been started, the parent is unreachable. Not that the parent is unwilling to complete it. If the parent does not want to complete the application, or the parent is saying, I don't qualify and I do not want this, you cannot use the counselor signature form. In the event that the parent is not reachable, then the signature form is appropriate.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to start talking about the new Washington College Grant. We're very excited about this. So the Washington College Grant is an expansion of the state need grant. It covers not just 2-year and 4-year programs, but it will also include approved 18-month apprenticeships. And I've had people say, oh, but for apprenticeships, you know, those are free and the student gets paid while they're doing it. What funding would they need? There's supplies that cost money. Some apprenticeship programs are articulated through colleges, and there's tuition costs that are associated. So there are costs that are associated with apprenticeships as well, and we want to make sure that students understand that that is one of the pathways that they can choose with the new Washington College Grant. What it is a 2-year phase-in. So this current year right now, for students who are at the college, attending college, receiving the Washington College Grant, we have about 6,000 more students that are funded, and what it has is expanded the income levels. And this upcoming year, and this is why we're really focused on that class of 2020, these seniors, is they are the first class that will get the full expansion of the Washington College Grant. And what this does is it adds the access to more students by increasing the income rates. So on average, a family of 4 making around $50,000 or less, they would receive a full tuition award. And partial grants are going to be available for families, a family of 4, for example, making less than $97,000 a year. That's the big change, is that they're going to be eligible for some partial grants. And so there might be families that you are working with that last year they had a student in their family that's going to college and they applied for financial aid and they weren't eligible. They may be eligible this year. So we're really trying to make sure that all families understand, even though in the past you may not have been eligible, this might be the year that you are eligible. And it's going to take you about an hour to find out by completing a financial aid application. Do we have any questions on Washington College Grant? We have our income tables here, and they're also available right on our website. And so you can see the new eligibility starting in 2021. So these seniors, when we have, you know, almost 50% of them not apply, I know in those numbers we are seeing students that would be eligible for a lot of these funds. And that's why I am very passionate about this, that financial aid made the difference between me continuing on my pathway as a sandwich artist, which is code for Subway. Those of you who are laughing right now, I know you are Subway people. And me finding a career that I love, that I'm able to do something I love every single day and get paid a livable wage job. That's what I want for our youth. I want our seniors to know where they are now, what career they want, and how to navigate the educational pathway that they need, that they don't need to collect every degree, but they need to get the degree that they want for that career pathway, and how to best fund it using multiple funding sources, not just one application.
Can you verify that the Washington College Grant follows the same federal rules for ability to benefit? This would allow students without a high school credential to test at a certain level or earn 6 college level credits to be eligible.
So for ability benefit, I believe so, but I want to make sure with our financial aid director. Let me follow up on that question. I used to do ability to benefit testing at the community college, and I think it's a wonderful program. We're going to add it to our list of questions to follow up with. Thank you for that question, especially about ability to benefit. So applying for financial aid, it is a one application process for their initial application. So it doesn't include scholarships, but if they are applying for funding for state or federal, they're going to fill out either the FAFSA or the WAFSA. They only do one application, though. There can be only one. And so they're going to pick the one they're eligible for. Students who don't know what they're eligible for, because our counselors, and we can't ask what their citizenship status is. We encourage, as a best practice at a financial aid event, to put all the computers on the WAFSA application, because it has like about 5 questions it asks students, and that assesses them to see what application they qualify for. So they can start at the WAFSA at readysetgrad.org/WAFSA. They can start there, answer the questions for the assessment, and it will tell them either, oh, you qualify for the FAFSA or you qualify for the WAFSA. Now you're not forcing your students to disclose in front of their peers what application or their citizenship status. It just seems to work really well. Also, and we'll talk more about this, when we're doing financial aid nights, a lot of places will call them FAFSA nights. We understand that it's a hard habit to break, but when we are doing this work, we encourage families or colleges to label them as financial aid nights. Same with the high schools. That is more inclusive of all different funding sources, but also every year I get asked on the phone at least once, when are we doing our WAFSA night? When is the school doing their WAFSA night? And I get these calls usually around May after a lot of the deadlines have passed. So by having a FAFSA night and not saying it's for all applications, you're excluding a population of your students. Calling it a financial aid night allows you to also talk about scholarships and other funding sources. So it's more inclusive of your students and of your funding opportunities. So for the FAFSA, in Washington State, it's going to be students who have a Social Security number or from a freely associated state like Marshall Islands. We do not care about the parent's citizenship status in this process. You're going to have mixed status families. We are looking at the status of the student themselves who is the applicant of the application. If the parent is undocumented, they can do either process. It's just whatever one the student is eligible for. For the WAFSA, it's for students who don't have a Social Security number or have expired or unexpired DACA status. You will have a small population of students that are not going to be eligible for either because of the date they moved to Washington by. If they didn't move to Washington and reside 3 years prior to graduating from high school, they will not be eligible or may not be eligible. And so when we're doing financial aid work, I always tell colleges and high schools, always have other pathways. So if they don't qualify for the FAFSA and they don't qualify for the WAFSA, nothing hurts more than saying there's no funding source for a student. But we have a scholarship list that comes from the On 1079 scholarship, or the conference. The scholarship is 45 pages long of scholarships that have no citizenship status. And so we will be sending you a flash drive key after the webinar today. We're putting together packages to send you your keys, and I've loaded that onto your USB flash drive.
Is there concern that those not eligible for FAFSA and file the WAFSA might expose family members that are not documented?
So either application is going to require the student, if the parent is undocumented, to enter zeros. So they're going to disclose it either on a FAFSA or a WAFSA. There's a small number of students that we have found that qualify for the FAFSA, but have decided because they don't want to disclose on the FAFSA that their parents have mixed status, that they have opted to only do the WAFSA. And they can always call our WAFSA hotline for more help in that process. But some families have decided that they don't want to do the federal side of the application. They're forfeiting that federal funding, and they're just doing the WAFSA and getting state funding.
There is a privacy statement at the beginning of the WAFSA that students can read, and a link to a governor's note on privacy and safety. However, in working with these students, we can't guarantee that that's enough privacy for them. So just being comfortable in having the conversation around the privacy statement and being able to direct them to those resources, but also, again, ultimately knowing it's not up to us to choose whether a student files an application or not.
Exactly. So we're here to tell students, like, here's all the benefits of financial aid, but also here are some of the risks. They understand that there could be some risk there. And they're then, as a family, allowed to weigh their decision on what they want to do. But we're not there to tell every student you have to apply for financial aid. We're here to tell them the benefits and possibly some of the challenges, and let them make a family decision. And so in that application, they will either application or they're gonna have to put in zeros for the Social Security number if they don't have one. And so that can be concerning to students. We just want to be very sensitive in that work. And we'll talk more about that during the FAFSA section. No matter which application they fill out, October 1st, that's when they all open. So, you know, everything starts gearing up with pumpkin spice and everything nice, and that's when we start filling out our financial aid applications. We encourage students to do it early because there are a lot of deadlines that have been moved earlier for certain schools. Also, the earlier they get it done, the more time they have to resolve any errors or issues they have in the application. So they're going to fill it out starting in October. They're going to use prior year taxes. So this current year seniors, they're going to be doing the 2021 FAFSA or WAFSA. They're using 2018 taxes. And we'll talk more about the tax component when we look at the application itself. So we're going to do that right now. We're going to go through a FAFSA overview. So there are 3 ways you can apply for the FAFSA. There is the website, the FAFSA app, and the paper application. The website and the FAFSA app are the 2 most common ways. We find that with the paper application, it takes longer to process those, and so we know that this is more utilized by populations, typically incarcerated youth will be using a paper application because of their lack of access to the internet at their correctional high schools. Sometimes the website will encounter errors on the web. Those of you might be familiar with that statement of you've encountered an error on FAFSA on the web. If you're finding that there's a lot of errors occurring, change browsers. The first thing I encourage you to do is if it's crashing, change browsers. That seems to help. Sometimes if you don't have the most up-to-date version of Chrome or whatever you're using, it will not work as effectively. Also, if it seems to be a major, like, oh, the website's down. Like sometimes it will say, like, we are currently unavailable because they're doing something, putting a patch and things like that. I found that the FAFSA app itself still is running. I don't know if it's on another server or what, but we've been able to salvage financial aid nights where we haven't been able to get into the computers because of outages and had students do the application on their phones. And so that is another opportunity. Students seem to really enjoy doing it on the phone. The questions are done in typically most the same way, but there is more answering logic in the app than there is on the application itself. Okay.
Do you know when the reduction in the number of questions asked on the FAFSA per the recently passed Future Act will take place?
I'm not sure. Department of Ed will know, so I know that we get updates from them around springtime, and it's one of the things I'll be asking about. So we are excited to see some simplification and a reduction in those questions. But we typically don't see anything added on mid-year for the application, so my hope is that it will come with the 21-22 FAFSA and then be uploaded as well into the 2021. And as soon as we know more, this is what I love about the flash drives we're sending to you guys. So we're gonna send you guys these key flash drives. You plug it in, and when you go in, you're gonna register the key to your name with your email address. When I get more information, like changes to the application, dear colleague letters, things that give us new updates on financial aid, then I'm able to push those documents out to you directly through your key, and it automatically updates. When you plug your key in, it says, hey, there's new updates, and those are the documents I've put on your key. So when you register your key, it allows us to have your email address so that I can send you out a notification that those updates have been made. So as soon as I get that, I'm very excited to see what it's going to look like. As soon as I have screenshots, I will, in the fall, do a line-by-line with the new application with those questions. If you are working with incarcerated youth, I am working on providing materials in a format that is accepted by the correctional high schools. So we know that staples can be a problem for that population when it comes for the workbooks and stuff like that. I bought a sewing machine, an industrial sewing machine at a garage sale. So what I can do now is sew the spines of the books up so that they can have our student workbooks as well as other materials that typically haven't been available in the past because of concerns about things like that. So if you're working with incarcerated youth, please feel free to email me. I'm happy to send you a packet of the materials I'm putting together, including a paper FAFSA. My whole goal is to make sure that every high school senior, especially our incarcerated youth, have information about financial aid. There's a lot of misconceptions about financial aid and incarcerated youth. A lot of people think that any student with a felony will not get federal financial aid, and that is a big misconception. A student has to receive a drug felony while receiving federal financial aid for that to be an issue. And even then, if they go through a process where it's expunged, things like that, there are ways that it also may not impact it. But for some students, they are hearing, oh, you have a felony, there's no aid available for you. That may not be the case. So we want to make sure that if education is part of their reentry plan, that we are supporting that with financial aid information. So if you're working with incarcerated youth, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to send you a sample pack. These are the most common FAFSA mistakes. Okay, legal information is the first one. They have to list their name and social security number as listed on the card. So that they can't use a nickname, they can't use, unfortunately, like I've had students make up their social security number because they forgot to bring their card with them. This is not where we make up stuff. This is where we take the application process slow and steady and make sure it's accurate. This is not the great race of who can get an FSA ID done first or an application done first. It's all about getting it done accurately. You can get it done quickly. I had a room full of students that were doing FSA ID creations, and I heard them whisper, just make it up. And I thought, uh-oh, we're doing a federal form here. So I said, what are we making up? They all had made up social security numbers. They said, just that number that's at the top, I don't know. We don't know what it is. Our student number doesn't fit in there, so we're just making it up. By the time I got to them and heard that, they had already created their FSA IDs and attached it to the wrong social security numbers. So it's going to show as a mismatch, but now they have to call in to have the social security number detached from their name. So it ended up being a very long process. What took them 10 minutes took about 4 hours for the entire room to have it fixed by calling one by one students down and having them call federal student aid. So taking their time, man, really can save us in errors in the future. They need to put in the correct FAFSA year. So we will have students that, of course, like seniors are like, hey, I'm the class of 2020, and this is the 1920 application, so this is the one I need to do. It makes sense to a student. What they don't realize is that's the college funding year, and they've now applied for financial aid for the year that they're going to high school. So what they're going to want to do is, if that happens, we always want things to be a learning experience. I tell students, you've just done like basically a practice FAFSA. Now you're going to learn how to do a renewal. So then they'll be able to go into the application, select a renewal for 2021, and then do the application there. That way, they're at least getting the correct one done. And now, when they go to college and they have to do a renewal in October, they know how to do it. I think someone popped up a...
Another mistake that has happened, and it is difficult to fix, is when a student has forgotten their entire FSA ID. Many students have given up applying because of this.
Yes, the FSA ID can be a challenge. And so we have some tools for students to be able to keep track of their FSA ID in the creation process. We also have a couple videos that are like little snippet training videos about unlocking your FSA ID. We encourage students, you need to keep that information, and it's much easier in this process, and we'll talk more about the FSA ID in a minute. It's much easier if they verify their email address and phone number in the process. That allows them access to unlock their application, their FSA ID, in the process versus giving up. We don't want students to give up in this process, but we know that that can be a challenge. Putting in the correct tax information. So not just the correct tax year, but we, students will say, especially at the high school, what is my parents is mine, and therefore if my parents made $32,000 on their taxes, the students will sometimes duplicate that in their own income section. And now you've duplicated the income of the family. Same thing with taxes paid. So one of the most common error in the tax section is families putting in the same amount, like, hey, our family made $32,000 this year, and we also paid $32,000 in taxes. Whew. Uncle Sam gave you a rough year this year. We're pretty sure that's an error. So we have them go back in and make sure that it's not equal to or exceeding the amount earned, but that's a very common error. Student marital status. I see this happen when I'm out at the high schools. There's multiple options: single, married, divorced, widowed. But students who are in relationships don't like that there's no like single, but I've got a relationship going on. And so they are sometimes selecting married because that's their plan. Like, while I'm in college, I'm planning on getting married. Or they are embarrassed to put down single when the significant other is sitting next to them. That's always a funny one. So we have to explain to them, this is for financial aid purposes. Congratulations, you're in a relationship. That's awesome. But you are not married. Even if you're thinking about it down the road. So I tell students, you got to put a ring on it and marry it before you do the application for you to be married on the application.
So jumping back to tax info, I work with immigrants. Sometimes they've lived abroad with their parents. What income should they report?
So they're going to report on there, if they didn't pay U.S. taxes, they're still going to report it as an income. It's not going to be a U.S. tax income. And it's on the application itself. When you're putting in the tax form that you completed, for those students, they're typically not going to be able to use a data retrieval tool, which we'll talk more about that amazing tool, which is a partnership through IRS and the FAFSA. But when they put their application in, there's question marks on the application, and we'll show you here in a couple minutes. It'll clarify the question of what type of funding is going to go into those boxes. So if it's untaxed or taxed income, or maybe they worked overseas but did pay U.S. taxes, there's a lot of situations that can occur that way. The biggest thing is for those families who are using an ITIN number for their taxes. If they receive an ITIN number and they're paying taxes, they want to make sure, if they don't have a Social Security number, that they're using zeros instead of that ITIN number. It's a very common mistake for families to put in. And of course, why wouldn't they? They're filing taxes with the number, and we're talking about taxes, so they are like, how do I enter this information? And so we always have them answer with zeros.
So we have a follow-up for the tax info. So this person says, yes, but should they put the cost of living in their country?
Cost of living isn't asked on the application. It is just how much they've earned. So they're gonna cost of living in the country doesn't matter.
I wonder if they're talking about change from maybe a different currency to ours.
Oh, if it's a different currency though, if there's exchange rates, then they can use an exchange rate calculator. If they didn't earn anything. So if the parents didn't earn anything, then they won't enter in anything if they didn't file taxes and they didn't earn anything, they'll enter, that will be reflected in the application. So they'll ask, how much did you earn this year? They're going to put zero. But they're also going to want to make sure they report any of their assets as listed in the application. And we'll see those screenshots in a minute here. Good questions. So student marital status, they have had to reflect it accurately. Student household size, so on the FAFSA now, there's a calculator on there, so it's harder for students to incorrectly enter this, but on the WAFSA, they still have to manually enter in their household size. The student household size is the student themselves, and then also the dependents of that student. So whoever they're providing 51% or more support of, their children. So students, when we say dependents, we have to really think about common definitions. I had a student that told me, okay, I have 2 dependents. I'm like, okay, so you have 2 children. And she was like, yeah, and they're real expensive, and mom's made me pay for them ever since I brought them home. I'm thinking, okay, this sounds like we're getting personal here, okay. And then she's like, and kitten food's really expensive. I'm like, oh, do you have 2 feline dependents? And she's like, yeah. I'm a cat mom. And I'm like, that's awesome. Congratulations, cat mom. So on the dependent section, they're asking about humans. And so she thought for sure that it was that she needed to list anything she was providing 51% or more support on. And I asked her why she decided to put the cats in there. Like, why did you put them under your dependents? And she said, and it makes total sense, they're my dependents because they depend on me. I provide for them. They depend on me. Therefore, they're my dependents. In this process, the terms that we're using and the definitions we're using are the federal terms for the FAFSA, and it can be really confusing to students. So having those common definitions is really important. So we had to remove her feline dependents from the applications a couple years ago when you could manually enter those students, enter in extra dependents. And even she followed up, she wanted to know as soon as they were off the kitten food, does that mean that they are full-blown dependents? Nope, they're still felines. They have to be human. So they want to make sure they answer their household size, and their parent will have their own household size. And then to not forget to enter those other family members, especially in the parent household size, that are going to college. Don't forget, if they got other students that are attending college, they want to enter that in there so that the calculations are correct. So those are the most common ones that we're finding right now. Yes, and so someone posted, sometimes students are supporting their parents, yes, and they'll reflect that on their income side too. We do have students that are providing a major amount of support for their parents, and we don't want to, you know, students are in all different situations. We don't want to make any assumptions in this process, and that's why we want them to fill out this information. And when we get to the tax information, I always tell students, I'm here to help. You know, just raise your hand, I'll come around and get to you. But I try not to hover too much in that portion because I've had family members embarrassed about what they're reporting finance-wise, and we want to make sure they feel very comfortable in doing that so they have a little privacy doing that work. So in the FAFSA, and especially in the WAFSA as well, students are either considered dependent or independent. Dependent students are typically under the age of 24. 24 is that magical birthday where they receive their, like, oh, I am now an independent student based on financial aid standards. I know when I turned 24, I literally had my 24th birthday party theme was, now I'm based on my own income. It was very exciting. I don't think every student is like that, but it really, for me, meant the difference of being able to get more funding and pay for school. If they are dependent students, they're typically going to be required to provide parent information. And so a lot of the questions we get are around who is my parent. So much so the Department of Ed, Federal Student Aid, has made a chart, a flow chart. When you're going to financial aid events or working with students on financial aid, I encourage you, print up a stack of these. I leave one at each computer and I let families make that determination of who the parent is without having to get too involved. For families, this is going to be sensitive. You know, a couple years ago, I had a student that as soon as I asked, you know, okay, well, who's the parent in this application, the student started crying because the parents had just gotten divorced 2 weeks earlier, but they didn't know how, like, it says a legal divorce, and I don't know that dad moved out 2 weeks ago, it was too fresh, and all of a sudden we had a student who's dealing with trauma in front of their peers. So 2 best practices are leaving these on each table and letting the family determine who the parent is. And at the same time, if you are hosting your own event, having a room that is space a student could process information that may be difficult for them and doing it away from their peers. So you will have students that are processing family stuff. You also may have students that find out in this process that they're undocumented. Them processing that away from their peers, I think, is critical, so giving that space is important. One thing I really want to highlight, so if they're married, it's going to be both parents' income information. If they're remarried, it's the parent they live with the most. So we don't care who's claimed on whose taxes. What we care about is who's providing, where are they staying 51% or more of the time. I know there's 365 days in a year, so we know that there's going to be one house they're staying at, typically more than another. So they need to designate one or the other. If it's a full 50-50 split and they're like, nope, parents have a full, like, at 10:45 p.m., I move on over to the other parent's house because it's a full-blown 50-50 split, then it's going to be which parent is providing more financial support. Then that's the parent's information that they're going to use. And so if they're remarried, it's going to be the parent and the step-parent's income. So it's going to be both their incomes. If the parent is single or widowed, it's just a single or surviving parent. So unmarried, separated, or divorced, but still living together, congratulations. But we're going to need both parents' income at that point. And then divorced, separated, and not living together, it's that parent they live with the most. If the parent is in a situation like a legal guardianship, they're going to be considered independent. We do not need the guardian's income information. They don't care about if the student is living, if they have informal living arrangements, and maybe they're living with grandma because they live close to the school, but they still have a great relationship with the parents, they're still going to need parent tax information. If the student is in a situation that seems like an unusual circumstance, I encourage them, number one, to connect with their high school counselor if they're in a special living circumstance that might qualify them from a Kini-Vinto status. That would also qualify them for being independent. But sometimes, because students will see us once and for a short period of time, sometimes we get more of the story than the counselors are because it's very low risk to tell me what their living situation is, but they're not going to tell the counselor because they're afraid that CPS is going to come. So sometimes we get more of the story, and I encourage, if it sounds like the story, sounds like the student's self-supporting and at risk for homelessness, they need to connect with their McKinney-Vento liaison, not just for support in this process, but for other supports for that population. Also, if they are in a situation where they can't provide parent information because of the relationship, maybe they have no contact with their parents, so that they need to reach out to the financial aid office so they can do assess for a dependency override. So if a student's in a special circumstance, we want to make sure that they're accurately assessed for funding. So the first step for creating a financial aid application is the FSA ID. It's basically you creating an account for the application. The student will need one, and then the parent who's going to be signing the application will need one. If the parent cannot create an FSA ID because of their status, so if they don't have a social security number, they can't create an FSA ID, then they will manually sign a paper copy of the application and send it in. So the FSA ID, this is something that at financial aid events I find takes up a lot of time in the application process. So when we're having a financial aid night, that if they haven't created their FSA ID ahead of time, it eats up a lot of that time with the financial aid officers. So we really encourage that the FSA ID is done earlier on in the process, typically in the summer before their senior year starts. So we even have high schools that are including it in their your senior year starts now nights, where they are inviting the parents and the students to learn about senior night and graduation and things like that. They're actually doing, at those events, opening up computer labs and having parents create their FSA ID while they're there and talking to them about the process, as well as having students create their FSA ID. In the 12th year workbook, we list it as a junior task now because we've had so many students, especially if they come late to a financial aid event, not complete their application because they had to start with the FSA ID and it takes a little bit of time. Also, sometimes it can take time to connect and verify the name and social security number through the Social Security Administration database. So it's going to verify their information in that database, and that's why we want to make sure when they're creating the FSA ID that they're creating it as listed on their Social Security card. On this process as well, they're going to need an email address. High school students lose access to their high school email address after they graduate. I have literally only been to one school that allows them to keep their high school email address, and that's because they have 3 seniors and it's a big senior year this year. So most students will lose access, so they need to create an email address. And it'd be awesome if that email address does not make an admissions officer blush. That'd be a real good add-on there. So a professional email address that won't make an admissions officer blush, that they're going to check. If we know that the student's only going to check that email account that will make an admissions officer blush, I highly encourage the student to when they create the account for their FSA ID, to forward all their emails to the one email account that they're actually going to check. But they do need, and it has to be a separate email address for the parent from the student. So they can't use the student's email address to create a parent and a student's FSA ID. It has to be individual email addresses. So they're going to click on Create an FSA ID. Once they create the FSA ID, it's going to let them know that they can connect their email and their phone to it, and then they can verify it through a code that they send to the phone and that they send through email. Have the students verify at least one of those 2 items before they complete the process, because then if they get locked out, they can use their phone number or their email address to get back in. But they need to verify one or the other. They're going to log into the FAFSA. If they're the student, they're going to log in as a student. If they are the parent, they're going to sign in as a parent, preparer, or student from a freely associated state. They can also sign in using not just their FSA ID, but their student identifiers, including their social security number. But I highly encourage them to log in using their FSA ID because they won't have to re-enter it in the signature process. They're going to select the correct financial aid year. So the class of 2020 is going to be doing a 2020-2021 FAFSA, which sounds super futuristic, but we're there. They're going to create a save key, which is a 4 to 6 digit or character item that they will remember by the time that they're done with the application. The FSA ID is their own individual ID that they don't want to share with anybody, but the save key is something they do want to share with their parents. Because of that, they need to have the save key when they log out. If they haven't completed the application, they need the save key to get back in. So if the parents are logging in to do their portion, they'll need that save key, even if they haven't started the application before. As long as the student's already started it and the save key's in, they have to have it. And if they forget their save key, they can unlock it. It's a couple-step process. It's not the end of the world. It's not like the FSA ID where it's harder to get back in. It's going to ask if they've lived in Washington for 5 years. This is all going to be residency and eligibility. It's going to ask if they're a U.S. citizen. This confuses families because they think, wait a minute, I thought you only had to live in Washington for a year to get residency. It's okay. We figure if you survive one rainy season, you've ditched your umbrella, and now you've gone to a rain jacket, you're one of us. You survived one rainy year, and now you're a Washingtonian, not the 5-year that's listed on here. So it's just to encompass, I think, all states' residency requirements is why they list it that way. Then it's going to ask the student education level. This is where they're going to select if they want to be considered for work study. If they want to be considered, they're going to check yes. I do know that some schools will not consider them unless they check yes. It's going to move on to selective service questions. It's going to ask if the student's female or male. We understand that in Washington and in 12 other states that there is a non-binary gender designation, that it goes back to birth certificates. I have emailed and reached out to Federal Student Aid, and I'm hoping that they will have a response to that soon and guidance on how students should complete those applications if they have an XR gender designation from our state on their birth certificate. They are also aware of it in the WAFSA, and it's something that they are working on. It's going to ask if they select male, if they've registered for selective service. This is where they can select that if they haven't registered, that they want to be registered. If a student doesn't register for selective service by 26, and I mean, there are some reasons why they can still get aid, but typically it can make them ineligible for aid by not signing up for selective service by 26. And I've seen students who have lost aid eligibility because of this. So we want to make sure students understand. I know it can be very scary for parents to hear like selective service, but it is something they have to sign up for as a male. It's going to start asking questions for a parent's education and foster youth. If they were ever in foster care, this is going to trigger services at the college for them, like TRIO services. So we want to make sure they answer it accurately. And then it's going to start asking eligibility for aid itself by asking if they've ever received aid, and if they have received aid, if they've received a felony conviction while receiving aid, and if it was a drug felony conviction. So it'll ask them a bunch of questions, and then it'll assess their eligibility.
Can you talk once more about the is it 26 years old, 24 years old?
26.
Okay.
So if they're incarcerated the whole time, though, they do not, so we've had youth that are incarcerated and are released later on in their 20s. If they're incarcerated that whole time, they're waived for that requirement, and they still can apply for aid. So that's another misconception, is like, oh, they were never released, they never signed up for selective service. Now, if they were released for even a hot minute, they need to register for selective service. So they have, typically they say you have 6 months after your 18th birthday to do it, but they're a little lenient on it. It is a free process. Oh my goodness, I heard at one of our sites during our presentations that there's a website charging $15 for selective service registration. It is free to sign up for selective service, and it takes no more than like 7 minutes. It is a very quick process, but there are these companies out there that are taking these free processes, creating their own website, saying they're going to submit it for you, and charging you money. Financial aid application is one of them. There are some websites and some apps out there that are going to say, oh, to submit the free application for federal student aid, you're going to have to pay up $80. What? The first word in the application is free. Like, you have to make sure if a student's being asked to pay money to apply for financial aid, feel free to have them reach out to me. I'm happy to make sure they're on the right website. And I'm also happy to take down the name of the website that's charging them that money. Because back in the day, we had FAFSA.com that mirrored the FAFSA website but charged $80. That website ended up having to redirect to the actual free application. The student's going to go ahead and list the high school they attended, and we want to make sure that they confirm the high school that they attended. It's easier for our CEDARS data and matching to student records for the student portal. Then this is the fun part for students. They're going to select their colleges. They have up to 10 schools they can pick. So if a student tells you, but I want to go to 27 different schools. I mean, I know it's really hard to decide, and unless you're Hermione with a time turner, it's not going to happen. You're going to have to pick one. So they're going to want to narrow down those options. For students that have more than 10, I tell them, what are your top 10? And we have them put their top 10 in the application, and then once they're done with that application, I have them go through and make sure that those top 10 have all the things they want from a school, especially their major. That's a huge one that students seem to forget, like, oh, this school's near the water, or this school is like in California, or this school is where my parents went. But the most important thing that they're going to school for is training for their future career and their educational pathway. And if they don't have access to that major at that school, it may not be a good fit. You don't want to change your major and your whole career plan to a different career that you may not like just because you like the school you're going to. It's all about finding the right fit. If a student only has one school listed, I encourage. This is where they're going to want to do a reach, a target, a safety school, so they have options, especially in the award letter process. If you are doing campus tours where you're working with prospective students, especially high school seniors, sometimes a good best practice is leaving a small amount of time at the end of that campus tour and activity for high school seniors for them to have access to a computer to add your school to their financial aid application, so that if they know, oh my gosh, I just toured Central, this is amazing, I'm going to go here, then they are going to be able to at least have that on their application. Okay, we've got a question here. We read them out loud.
For someone who has previously received federal and state aid, but they failed their courses, then they lost their eligibility, what can they do to become eligible again?
So it depends on where they are owing funds back. Are they returned to funds for state funds or federal funds? They both need to be, for federal side, they have to make 6 months of on-time payments through a payment plan for the federal side for them to be back in the federal good graces. And in the state, they need to be a part of a plan, and I think they have to have more of those payments in. So they have to make sure that both are satisfied. If it is because of the school's satisfactory academic progress, they also need to be back in the good graces of the college's GPA and their, so there's academic suspension and financial suspension that they need to balance both of those. But it usually starts with starting to pay back those funds, and which can be very scary for students, and they do payment plans. And we will have contact information for our loan advocate here near the end at resources. Have them contact our loan advocate about the default process and how to get back into the payment process and doing payments. But I have a lot of students that think if I just ignore it, it'll go away. And that doesn't happen with student loans, and it can be really hard. I've also found that there are some emergency grants out there that are willing to cover like the first quarter tuition for a student coming back who's been in that situation, but it's been like 10 years since they've been in school. I've seen some grant programs that are done through school foundations that have provided that first quarter of funding to help them get on their feet to show that they can establish an academic record again. So also reaching out to find out if there's any other funding through your foundation. Did I answer that for you? Perfect. So they're going to select their schools. They want to make sure they select their housing option when they're going to be on campus. And so if they think in any way, shape, or form they're going to live on campus, they're going to select on campus. There is a misconception with students that the financial aid process and informs the admissions process. So I've had students who think if I select off campus and I'm not a burden on the housing situation, that might be more likely to be admitted to the school. That is not the case. They are really looking at whole different standards for the admissions process. They are not looking at the housing components. And so the other piece is if a student selects living on campus on here, in the admissions process, they need to designate that in their form as well. So I've had students tell me, but I said living on campus on my financial aid application, why don't I have housing? And they've missed all their housing deadlines. They need to make sure that they understand that the admissions application process and housing and financial aid are two different animals. They fill out their admissions application and their housing application, then they fill out their financial aid, and the two match up. They run off together and make an award letter. But we need both of those to be able to influence that process. But the financial aid process does not influence the admissions decision. I know because I've had students who have been left without housing and had to take a semester off so that they could get housing and then go back to school. And it's really hard when you when you put a pause on education, you lose that momentum coming out of high school, and it can be really challenging. So they're going to list where they're going to live. This is where it's going to start the student demographic information as well. So it's going to ask about the student's marital status. As you see a little banner right below student demographics and school selection, it's going to say who they are asking the information about. So this is going to determine the dependency status of the student. So it's going to ask their marital status. It's going to ask if they have any dependents. It's going to ask if they've been a risk for homelessness. It's going to ask a lot of questions. And students need to read these. This is really a study in critical reading, I feel like, for students. Students, if they don't read the whole question and say no to something that they might be eligible for, they could risk their independent status on an application because they didn't read through the question all the way. So they need to read through these thoroughly because there's so many of these questions because there's so many different circumstances that can make a student independent. But if they don't list it on here because they didn't read it thoroughly, I always tell students, financial aid officers are not psychics. If they were, they'd probably have other jobs. They don't know that you're in these situations, and you have to list it on there to prompt those questions. So it's going to do a dependency determination. It's going to ask about the student's household size in the dependency status. And then if they're independent, it's going to say you're considered independent. You may want to answer questions about your parents. For these situations, do you want to answer questions about your parents? I find a lot of students are reading the second half of that question that says, answer questions about your parents. But we know that students in these situations, getting that information from a parent may put them at risk for breaking a no contact order or just at risk for certain things. So we want to make sure the student's being safe, and they don't need to answer questions about their parents if they're independent. If they want to, they can, but it's not required. If they are dependent, it means that they are going to need to provide parent information. It's going to ask, do you have a special circumstance where you're unable to provide this parent information? If a student says no, it's going to pull up a screen of just all red letters that say, if you don't provide parent information, you will only be eligible for unsubsidized loans. Are you sure you don't want to not provide parent information? If a student's in a special circumstance that's not listed in that dependency status questionnaire, this is where they're going to reach out to the financial aid office. They're going to say, no, I'm unable to provide financial information, and they're going to continue on the application, and they're going to reach out to the financial aid office at all the schools that they've listed and ask to talk to a financial aid officer about their dependency status. That way, they can talk to financial aid officers directly, and they can make that determination at the institutional level. If they are, this is something I'm seeing at high school events, students will select, I'm unable to provide information about their parents because their parents is not there that night. The parents is in their student's life. They'd be happy to give them the information tomorrow, but they think because right here in the here and now, I'm unable to provide that, they select no and then finish the application, and now it's waiting for the dependency override. So we want to make sure that the students understand this means at not just this very moment, but that overall you cannot get this information from your parents. A special circumstance, and we'll talk more about this in the WAFSA, is not just like, oh, my parents don't want to provide this information, or I'm going to be paying for my own college, so I don't need to get my parents' information. That doesn't count. It is, if the parents don't want to provide that information, I encourage them, when we did these workshops across the state, the financial aid officers echoed the same thing. I encourage the parent to reach out to the financial aid office so they can hear about what limitations will occur if they don't provide that information. Sometimes a little bit of education helps the parent make that decision. But I know that we are asking for very sensitive information. When I go to these events, I bring candy with me. So I'm literally a stranger with a bag of candy who's now asking for your social security number and your taxes. Kind of stranger danger situation. I understand that parents, if they don't know the why behind what we're doing, can be very guarded about that financial information. I would be too. But if we explain why we're asking for the information, we're trying to paint a picture of your financial ability to support your student through college, they might be more willing. Also, that the IRS has this information and we can link it in the system sometimes. Them knowing why we're asking for it sometimes helps the parent be more willing in this process. So list if they're able to provide parent information. If they're able to provide parent information, now it's going to go into parent demographics. So it's going to say, okay, we need parent information. The banner says parent information, so we're always looking at the parents now. So what is their parent's marital status? And this is where students are going to get stuck because it's going to start asking for dates, anniversary dates, birthdays. It's so funny because this is where I'm like, students, this is where you get to memorize your parents' birthday. Like, you know, you're almost 18, time for you to know when your parents' birthdays are. If they don't know it, don't have them make it up. I had a student that started making up their parents' birthdays, and they both listed them born in, like, I think it was like 2000 or 2005, because they're like, well, that's how old my parents, they're like, they have to be like in their early 20s. And the parents were laughing hysterically because their parents were not in their early 20s. And so, because that's not how it works. And so they were just making up the dates. Whenever they make up a date, it's going to be an error. They have to make sure they have accurate information. This is where the parent is going to enter in zeros if they don't have a social security number. Again, if they enter their ITIN, tax identification number, undocumented parents who are paying taxes to that number, if they enter that in, it's going to create an error that the student's going to have to go in and fix. Oh, in this section as well, where it says, and you put in zeros, and you click next, it's going to highlight it in red and say that it's an error. If you click next again, it will move you forward. So it's still, even though they're following the guidance of only putting zeros in for no social security number, it's still going to throw some sort of error, and you have to click next for it to continue on. The parent household size, so this is where the parent is going to list their household, including their dependents. So on the screen here, you're going to see it has a lot of specific information like your mother, your father. The application they're working on, just listing it as parent 1, parent 2. The reason why it says that in here is because I had to do screenshots from multiple financial aid applications in this process, and so it'll have the language of mother or father. For some families, I have families that are filing their 2018 taxes right now because they didn't realize they were going to be in an owing status when they filed, and they've now gathered the funds they need to file their taxes. If they did not file the 2018 taxes, it's going to say that you've missed the deadline, but you're still planning on filing it. If they don't click the grayed out OK button in this, it will not move them along. So it doesn't say anywhere that they have to click OK, but they must click OK to continue, or it won't resolve. So they will estimate their taxes based upon their W-2s. But I know that people had more that they brought home month to month, it sounded like, in their paychecks. But when it came to tax filing, people had a small amount that they owed back in their taxes. And that was a surprise to some families. So we're hoping that this year is not the same. We hope that families were able to adjust those W-4s and not have that surprise this year. If they are going to file, they can list it that way. If they did file, it'll ask them how they filed. And so it'll ask if they filed, had a household, filed separately. It'll ask their tax filing status. I'm going to ask them if they want to link their information to the data retrieval tool. Oh, there's a question, sorry.
What is the minimum report that a person must earn in order to be required to file taxes?
Oh my gosh, I just did my taxes last night. It was popping into my head. I know it's a couple grand. I want to say it's like $4 grand. We can also get back to the exact number on it. We'll research it and let you guys know. The minimum amount of money that you can earn. I can't remember how many grand it is. I want to say it's like $4 grand. But we got Annie, our expert, going to get on Google and find out what the minimum earning amount is before you have to file taxes. And so for seniors, they may not have earned enough to file taxes this year, but next year in their application, they may have. So they want to make sure they include their taxes in the student section, which we'll get to in a minute.
Do you want me to chime in really quick?
Yeah.
So Google tells me, again, check your sources if you want. It may not be the most reliable. If you're single and under the age of 65, the minimum amount of annual gross income you can make that requires filing a tax return is $12,200. Or older, if you're older than 65, that goes up to $13,850. Again, that's a single person, so the heads up there.
So there we go. So And if you're claimed as a dependent, it is lower. I just don't know what that amount is. We'll get back on the Googles. So parents may want to directly transfer their taxes from the IRS into the financial aid application. So this is a newer tool over the last couple years that allows a faster transferring of the information. But this doesn't mean that parents shouldn't bring their taxes to financial aid events, because when they link their information from the IRS, it's going to show them, hey, you're going to be going to another web page to attach your taxes to this information. When you enter that information, it's going to ask for the address as listed on their federal tax return. So this literally means if the accountant accidentally put a space before the address, that space has to be there. Every single character, even spaces, have to match exactly as listed on the tax form, or it will not be able to match the taxes to the person. It has to be the name as listed. It has to be the address as listed. Even if they misspell the town, like I had a student misspell the town name, and they were able to fix that. So like instead of Longview, it's Longview. They had it Longview on the tax return. Longview is what had to go in there, even though Longview is not a town. It's however it's listed. If they've moved, we don't care. We just have it listed as on the tax return. This is one of the the biggest challenges, sticking points. The other issue with the DRT is families will think, well, I don't have to bring my taxes if I'm transferring it in. But when you get to the next screen, it's going to say for all of the information, instead of the actual information from the IRS, it's going to say transferred from IRS. So it's going to mask that data. That is part of the agreement the IRS has with the federal student aid, is that we will provide that data link, but we're going to mask the data so no one can see it, which means it's going to ask, okay, this was your adjusted gross income. How much did parent 1 make? How much did parent 2 make? You won't know unless you have your taxes with you, the splits. So they need to know what the split is going to be for income. So always having their taxes with them is critical for this process. Using the data retrieval tool does increase accuracy, which does reduce verification chances. If they don't use the data retrieval tool, that's okay. They can go through this manually, and it will tell them the line number of the application of where they should be getting that information. So if it's going to ask what your adjusted gross income is, it's going to tell you on there, that's this line on your tax form. They can also hover over the question mark, that blue question mark there, and it will give them a better description of the question they're asking. So they'll give them more information about that question. They're going to list not just their taxed income, but their untaxed income as well. And this is going to include like their veteran non-educational benefits. Do those line numbers match the tax transcripts? No, it matches the tax form, but if they're using the tax transcript, it's more challenging. Now, we know if they're selected for verification, they're going to need a copy of that tax transcript. So I encourage families, their senior year, when the parents are, filing their taxes, like the junior year, the 2018 taxes last year, when you're filing taxes, just request a tax transcript at the same time and put it in with your taxes. So if your student's selected for verification, you have it sitting there and you're not waiting for the IRS to deliver that document to you. You can get your tax transcript online for some families, but to do that, like, you have to have a mortgage or a cell phone. There's certain things you have to have in order, or a car loan, for them to verify that. And so if you don't, you have to go through the manual process, which means faxing in a form through a fax machine, which students are very baffled by, to be able to get those documents.
What do tax schedules mean?
So if they're like looking at the new tax, like a Schedule K1 is investments, like they have, it's different types of funds. And so most of the families I'm working with do not have an investment K1 schedule. And it tells you that on the application itself. It'll say, now you need to go into your K1 schedule. And literally, I met one family that had that form this year. Then it's going to ask for parent assets. So in this part, this is where I really give the parents lots of space, because it's going to ask, what's the total of your current cash savings and checkings? I have families that think, oh my gosh, we don't have a savings, so we better lie here because we're embarrassed that we don't have a savings. Spoilers, a lot of families don't have savings anymore. And so I give extra space because I had a parent put in an amount and a student say, we don't have that. like, whenever I hear whispering, I'm always like, hey, just reflect whatever's in your account right now. This is going to help you with financial aid, but if you don't have the money there, don't list it. And vice versa. I've had families who are like, oh, we actually are saving up and we're going to buy a car next week, and so we have a lot on our cash savings and checking right now, but it's going to be not next week. So then submit it go ahead and submit it on Friday after you buy that car, because we know that money's not going to be there. It's going to ask their net worth of their of their parents' investments, including real estate, not their home they're living in. This is very common. You will see a student who will say, oh my goodness, we have large assets in real estate, but then you see they have their lower income, and that everything else is not matching up. So we want to make sure that they are only listing their rental properties, additional properties, not the home that they are residing in. And then it asks if they have a business, and they are talking about family farms or businesses with 100 or more employees. So if they have less than 100 employees, like I had a woman trying to put her Etsy shop down, no. That's not where it's going to go. Even though you have a couple employees that you're doing your Etsy shop with, this is 100 or more people. They're also going to list their 529 college savings plan as an investment as well. When they hover over the question mark, it tells them all the different categories and what they need to be pulling from. For the 529 plan for college saving plans, they need to know who is the owner of the account. So if the parent is the owner, it's a parent's asset. If the student is the owner, it's the student asset. Then it's going to ask for the student filing information. So now we bounced back to student information. It's going to be the student financials. It's going to ask if they filed taxes. If not, it's going to ask how much they earned in wages. And then it's going to ask the same questions about assets and untaxed income. When we ask this question about their total balance of cash savings and checking, we mean the student as an individual. Do not have them duplicate the parent's cash saving and checking, but students will do this because whatever is the parent's is theirs. We're talking about them right now. I had a student who had a couple thousand listed in there, and they're like, oh no, actually I have. And they literally pulled out their wallet. It was like under $1 and change, and loose change. And I was like, that's okay. Like remove what your parents' savings are. If you don't have a savings account, that's fine. Then they're going to have access to their FAFSA summary. This is another format of the application that they have just completed, and it's a great way for them to be able to look through it and make sure it looks correct. This is their last chance to assess for accuracy before submitting their application. So it gives them a different format to look at it in, and they can always adjust that information once they see an error on here. So if they see, oh my goodness, my email is one letter off, or my phone number's off, whatever it is, they can go back in and fix it before submitting. Now, if you are working with students who start this application and they don't touch the application for 45 days, so let's say they do the entire application but they don't sign it, or maybe they're waiting for parent information. If they don't log in for 45 days, they will wipe all the data from that application. So they'll have to start from scratch. They won't wipe like the FSA ID itself, but they're going to wipe the entire application. So students always need to be making continual progress in this process. Then they're going to sign the application. They're going to use their FSA ID. They'll sign, and then their parent is going to sign with their FSA ID. If the parent does not have an FSA ID, on the bottom left-hand side it says Other Options to Sign and Submit. They're going to click on that, and to give them access to a signature page. The signature page, when they have that page, parent is going to sign it. This is for parents who don't have FSA IDs. They're going to send that in. Now, they want to send the signature page to the address listed on the signature page. If they Google the Federal Student Aid page, it's showing the wrong P.O. box. And I emailed them for a correction, so I'm hoping they update the website soon. But the address, the P.O. box listed on the signature page, that is correct, and that's the one they want to send it to. Students sometimes struggle with filling out envelopes. I know this because I was in a classroom and they had to send stuff to Federal Student Aid, and I had a student write Federal Student Aid's address in scripty scrolling writing all across the front, but no room for return address. And I asked, why did you fill out this envelope this way? And literally they said, that's what it looked like on Harry Potter. Because they don't send letters frequently, sometimes they're not addressing envelopes. This is a great time for them to learn how to address an envelope. I also, when I go to schools, I have printed up mailing labels with the federal student aid address for the correct FAFSA year for signature pages, and we put that on the envelope, and then sometimes the high schools are willing to send those for free for the student on the student's behalf once they get a signature. So I just slap a sign here sticker on the signature page and then have it sent home. If I have chocolate with me, I always send it home with chocolate to the parent. Hey, your student just did this huge application today. They're going to need your signature. Once they've submitted their application, it's going to let them know if it's been processed. If they need to make corrections, they're going to go to the second link on the bottom where they can make corrections, but they have to wait typically 24 hours to 48 hours before they can make a correction in the system. It's also going to give them their student aid report, which lists out their EFC. Also, it has graduation, retention, and transfer rates of the schools they've applied for, so they can see all the schools they've listed. This is a great time for them also to review and make sure all the schools they wanted on there are listed. If they're missing a school under the graduation, retention, and transfer rates, it means it's not on the application itself. They have to go back in and add that school to their application. If they do a correction, they're going to be on what I affectionately call the vintage page. It looks like the old FAFSA before they remodified it and made it screen adaptable for multiple devices. So it's going to look like this. Students always ask, am I on the right page? It looks so different. They are, and I think that that's something they are working on adapting to make sure that the color palettes are the same and that they look the same. Finally, there is a demo app that you can use, a demo site. Oops, we're going to go back on. There we go. There's a demo site that you can use to play in the FAFSA. So if you want to know what the FAFSA looks like, if you want to fill one out for fun because you're a dork like me who likes doing stuff like that, you can. And they open up at the beginning of every financial aid year so you can see the new application. I love this because, you know, for me, every year I just do my own FAFSA to know what it looks like. But this is a great way to go in and pull screenshots that don't have private information. If you're looking for a specific student type, it will tell you like, okay, this is an independent student, this is a dependent student, this is a renewal, this is a new application. There's all these different situations that you can go and play in. And so they have them for both data years, but I encourage you to play in this before you start doing applications in the fall. It's a great way to get used to the application and not have there be any data at risk. I've even used it to walk students through the application too. This is what it looks like, or a parent so they can see what it looks like. Okay, so next, do we have any more questions for, none for FAFSA? Okay, we're gonna move along to the WAFSA. So for the WAFSA, we want to make sure you know that your job is to assist but not to prepare, and this is for FAFSA too. You're not there to prepare an application for somebody. You're here to assist them with it. If you prepare the application, two things are happening. Number one, it's illegal for us to do the applications itself. This is a federal document they're supposed to be filling out. Two, you rob them of a chance of learning how to do it themselves. And even if it's well-meaning, you may not be there to support them the following year with this process, and we want them to be self-sufficient in this process. With the WAFSA, particularly, we have a lot of sensitive information that we're asking, and so we want to be very mindful of situations, and that when we're asking, you know, for this information, that it can be challenging for students. Just be very mindful of the situations, not to make any assumptions about student statuses. State financial aid eligibility, that is what the WAFSA is for. So they're not going to be assessed for federal funding because they don't qualify. They'll be assessed for state funding, including Washington College Grant. And then if you need help, we have our Ready, Set, Grad /WAFSA, and there's a phone number you can call as well. But there's a line by line of the WAFSA that you can watch that we're going to kind of go through here. And then there's also a guide for the WAFSA that you can use with students. So in this presentation here, we're going to use undocumented students as an umbrella term to encompass non-citizens who meet the Washington residency requirements through House Bill 1079, non-citizens with DACA status, whether it is current status or expired, and then non-citizens who don't meet state residency requirements as well. We, again, don't want to make any assumptions when we are working with undocumented students. Also, we are using the term undocumented, and some students will prefer the term dreamers. Some students will prefer other terms. I always go by what the student prefers, but I've had students who will say, you know, you're using the term dreamer. When you use the term dreamer towards me, you're excluding my parents from this. And so I think that it can be, for some, an exclusionary term, and we want to make sure we're using the terminology the student prefers. So the residency requirements for Washington College Grant and College Bound Scholarship have aligned. So if a student qualifies for House Bill 1079 through living in Washington 3 years before graduating high school or earning their high school diploma, that they complete their full senior year in Washington, and that they live in Washington continuously after receiving the diploma before going to college, students think this means that they can't go on vacation sometimes. They think, oh my gosh, well, I was going to go to Disneyland, but now I can't because I have to live here continuously. No, we understand the allure of the Magic Kingdom. Go to Disneyland. Don't move to Disneyland. You can't establish residency. All of us want to move to Disneyland, I guarantee you, but you're going to need to come back and go to school. So as long as they're not establishing residency in a new state, and they're maintaining their Washington residency, it's fine. I've just had students who think that that means they have to cancel senior trips, and that's not the case. Also, they're going to sign an affidavit saying that they're going to file for permanent residency when they're eligible. They either can meet requirements through that or through having expired or unexpired DACA. And so what this means is in the past, students were not eligible, will be eligible now. So we are having all students who are eligible by income levels applying for the College Bound Scholarship, their 7th and 8th grade, and I think we will see students that are benefiting from that in the next couple of years. We're really excited about that alignment. Anything you want to add on? Okay. Annie talked about the privacy statement earlier, and so this is the privacy statement on the WAFSA. We wanted to make sure we blew it up here for you to see, but this is the statement they read. I encourage in this process, students will just like click through a lot of stuff, like I agree to all the terms and all the conditions. We want them to read this information as well because it's important for them to know how their data is being used. Once they read through that information, they are going to go ahead and start their application. So it looks like we had a question.
Is there a time limit for them to file for residency? Do they need to do it immediately?
It's when they're eligible, so it depends on the student. And the affidavit, I think, is included in a lot of the college admissions applications. So that's an easy way for them to sign it. But yeah, it varies from student to student when that timeline starts in their situations. So for the application, if they're a brand new student, they're going to click Start a New WAFSA, and that's going to put them through the eligibility questionnaire. So it's going to ask them about their status, it's going to ask them about residency, and it's going to determine whether they're FAFSA or WAFSA eligible. For the WAFSA eligibility, they are going to see a message saying, congratulations, you're WAFSA eligible, and then it's going to move them on to their next step of the application.
One thing to note here is for students who are eligible for the FAFSA but choose not to complete it, while they answer these WAFSA questions, you know, they are going to be eligible for the FAFSA. So at some point amid those WAFSA questions, there's a question that says, yes, I know I'm FAFSA eligible and I'm choosing to submit the WAFSA application. So just a heads up, because we know some students will be eligible for FAFSA but will not be filing one. It's just nice to know at what point in the process they'll be selecting that option.
Perfect. And if they are eligible for the FAFSA and they've completed, it's going to ask, have you already completed FAFSA? This is where we're trying to catch those students that think, oh my gosh, I got so much money from the FAFSA. If I apply for the WAFSA, I'll get twice as much money. No, all you're going to do is cause me a bunch of gray hair because I'm trying to figure out which application you actually wanted to complete. When you complete the FAFSA, you're getting state and federal funding. You can't double down on that. So instead of having students do a second application, we've added an extra question that just says if you've done the FAFSA already, that you have already completed it and you don't need to complete a WAFSA. And we encourage those students who are concerned about funding to start the application process for scholarships. They're going to create their WAFSA account. This is much like the FSA ID process in the way that this is them just starting the process and getting their username. They're going to, again, use an email address that they will check regularly that doesn't make an admissions officer blush. They're going to use some security questions as well for this process. If they have an ITIN number or a DACA number or a Social Security number, this is where they're going to enter that in. Through this process, parents are going to enter in zeros for their Social Security number, but this is where they can designate an ITIN number if they have it. If they started a WAFSA before and have a WAFSA ID, they can also enter it in here so we can match the applications. Doing this application, it is very, it's nice to know how far into the application you are and how far you have to go. So it walks you through on the left side a checklist of all the sections of this application. And then at the very top, it's going to tell you how many pages into that section you are. So you know that if it's like 9:30 and your financial aid event ended at 9 and you have a family that's on student demographic page 3, that it's going to take a while for them to finish that application. And so this kind of helps you know where they are in the process and how long it's going to take. Sometimes also a student needs to just hear like, you're almost done, it's okay. And this is how I can tell you're almost done. Also, you'll notice that the flow of the questions are going to be a little different. So it's going to ask student demographic information as well as their residency, education plans, dependency, then the student tax information, then it transfers over to parent information. So instead of bouncing back and forth between the parents multiple times, it's going to ask all of the student information, then it's going to ask for the parent information, and then together they have the school section. It's a great time to have a conversation that students can have with their parents about the schools that they want to go to, and that way they know they can support their students. So they're going to enter in general information. When they click save and continue, it's always going to save at the end of each page, just like the FAFSA. And then here it just kind of lists the, again, what it looks like for the flow of the application. For student driver's license, they can select no license. Students get very excited about their licenses though. So sometimes it's just worth it to let the student go get their license if they've left it in a different classroom. I've found they're very proud. They'll bring you this crisp brand new license. They just want to put it in there. But if they don't have a license, it's okay. They can select no license. Again, another opportunity to put in their Social Security, DACA, or ITIN number. At the top, it lists that it's going to be all student demographics, so this is all student information.
It's also important to note with the Save and Continue button that sometimes students, whether maybe a parent isn't there, so they're not entering in all the information, and they want to skip through sections, that's totally fine. But if they're not clicking the Save and Continue button, their information isn't guaranteed to stay there. So if they're completed with a page or a section, they need to click that Save and Continue button to make sure that their info is staying where they put it.
Yeah, that's why I like the flow of this one, because really they can get a lot of the application done with their own information first and then transferred over to the parent side. The challenges can be, though, again, if they're kind of skipping around, we encourage that they complete a full section at a time. So don't bounce around between sections. Try to sit through and complete one whole section. I'm going to ask about student marital status here. This is where the student is allowed to add additional. There's no preloaded calculation of their student household size. So this is where that error can occur, where they can put their, the cat moms can put their kittens in here on accident and it can throw an error code. So they need to read through everything and list specifically what a dependent is on here. I wanted it first one to say human, but they just assume that people will believe that. Then it's going to go ahead and go through your residency information. So it's going to ask about, it's going to basically certify that, like, yes, by the time I begin college, I've met 1079 requirements, or no, I won't meet them. But I want to learn about other ways to qualify for in-state tuition. If a student doesn't qualify for the WAFSA in this application process or the FAFSA, that's again where we're going to provide that 45-page list of scholarships to the student so they can start that process as well. It's going to go ahead and list questions about DACA status as well. So on the WAFSA versus the FAFSA, when you answer a question, it's going to load in more questions into it. So it's that logic where it's going to open up more questions. We find that if all the questions are listed on one page all at once, the students can get, one, overwhelmed, and two, not read them before answering them. And so when it pops open another bar, it seems that they are more willing to read those questions through. Then it's going to go through the dependency determination. It's going to ask them questions. Again, this is one that expands quite a bit. So they will answer questions, they'll expand. Okay, well, did you have any of these circumstances? No? Okay, how about these? It's because there's so many different circumstances. We want them to read them through thoroughly and answer as accurately as possible. If they're considered dependent and they can't provide parent information, what I love about this here is it lists what those specific, like here are some situations where you might be considered dependent, but you might not need your parent information, and you need to talk to a financial aid officer to make sure. But like if your parents are incarcerated, or you've left home due to an abusive family environment, or you don't know where your parents are, and you haven't been adopted, and you don't have access to them. What they don't consider, this is what I like about this, is it lists what they don't consider a special circumstance, and this is really eye-opening for parents who don't want to provide information just because they don't want to provide it, because they don't understand the process or they have their own reasonings. It literally lists all the reasons. Parents aren't providing financial support, for college. They refuse to give you their tax information. You're not listed as dependent. Again, we don't care who's the dependent. We care where they're staying. So this lists out some of those situations that are not considered special circumstances. What we do know is if a student selects special circumstances and that they can't provide parent information due to special circumstances and there's no special circumstance that exists, it really can hold up that application. Then it's going to move to student tax, income and tax data. So it's going to ask them about tax and untaxed income. It's going to ask if they filed taxes. Then it's going to move on to the parent section. The parent section is going to ask for the parent's household size, just like all these are going to be the same questions as the FAFSA. So it's the same questions, just done in a different format. Again, we don't care about the citizenship status in this process. So if the parents don't have, especially the parent status in the WAFSA, if they don't have a Social Security number, they're just going to put zeros in. So they don't have to have a Social Security number. The parent does not have to have a SOCH in order for the student to apply. It's the student's application. It's going to ask about tax status and then also federal benefits that they've received. So it walks them through those, just like on the FAFSA. Then it's going to go into the school list. So this is, again, where the students are going to want to select if they're going to live on campus or off campus. What I love about this application is instead of having to put a school code in or having to search for a school, all of the eligible institutions in Washington State, because these are for Washington State schools only, they are in a drop-down box. So the student can just select them from the drop-down box, and they can put up to 10 schools just like on the FAFSA. The next step is for them to view their application. This is just like the FAFSA summary, except for they have to click on View Form and view their form in order to continue on in the application. Then they're going to select that they acknowledge the information is true and correct. And then they're going to sign their application, and they're going to do this electronically. They're going to sign, and so it talks about how to sign, the software that you need to sign. If a student is struggling with the software component, a lot of the high schools will have access in their school libraries, and then public libraries for our adult populations are great. But if they are worried about access, sometimes even if you're at an event, just knowing where your local public computer access is good. And for some of those parents that are really struggling with technology itself, a lot of our public libraries have free basic computer classes where they will walk you through the basics of setting up an email. It's free for them to do. It's awesome. I encourage to reach out to your families with that, having that information at your events as well. The student's then going to sign their form. They're going to put their first and last name, the password they created when they started the process, and then they're going to put their current city and state. This is them signing their application. Then they're going to invite their parent to sign the application. So once they've finished that part, it's going to say it's incomplete, more pending a parent signature. They're going to select the little person with a plus sign. That means they're inviting a parent to sign the application. They're going to select the parent that they want to sign. So in the WAFSA, ask, what is your parent's email address? It's important that they use an accurate email address they can check, because that's what they're going to use for the signature process. They select the parent that's going to sign, And then it's going to invite the parent to create a portal. It's going to generate portal access. They're going to create an account and sign the application. The parent has to sign on a dependent application for it to be complete. Again, students can go back in after the fact and they can update their colleges if they find more colleges they want to go to, or maybe they want to remove some and add different ones if they have more than 10. They're going to use scholarship applications like crazy. I don't know about you guys, but I have seen so many scholarships go unawarded. There are scholarships for everything. I mean, there is a duct tape scholarship. There is a left-handed scholarship. There's a zombie scholarship where you talk about the zombie apocalypse and what you would do and where you would go to survive it. We even have a little work activity for students where they can read through. We all wrote essays for that scholarship, and we wrote them very poorly and very well. So there's like 5 different essays that they can go through and actually see what a scholarship ranking rubric looks like, and they can rank those scholarships, and it helps them understand why it's important to follow the word count and all the other requirements of a scholarship. I have seen scholarships go unawarded, and it's very sad to call somebody and say, nobody wants your money. Like, hi, person who's willing to donate to higher education access, no one wanted your money. We know that's not the case. Students don't believe in themselves at times, and when they don't fill out a college application for scholarships, I've had students tell me literally, like, to pay for me to go. So we want to make sure that students are applying for scholarships. And then there's a conference for high school students, the Beyond 1079 conference that's student-led. It's really awesome. I encourage you, if you're working with students, especially if they are receiving funding and meet 1079 requirements, this conference is amazing. It's not just about financial aid. It's about all facets of life, and it's just a very empowering opportunity for students. I encourage you to support students in their access to that. And if you're working with student leaders, I encourage them to get involved as well. And then keep an eye out for students. They need to keep an eye out for their financial aid letters and requests. We tell them, like, you might get a request from your college that's for more information. It's called verification. 1 in 3 are selected, and we know that if they don't finish that process, it doesn't just go away. They may lose access to their aid. They may not be able to complete their file. So they need to respond. We tell them financial aid officers are not sending you letters to be a pen pal. So if they send you a letter or a postcard or even a pigeon, you need to respond to it. And then they need to respond by typically May 1st for some institutions, or the school's deadline to accept their aid. Best practices and next steps. We're finding that really providing translated materials is huge. If you can provide translated materials, and in printed format is great, as well as digitally to families, but also letting families know that the FAFSA is offered in Spanish. So if you have families that are Spanish speaking and they're more comfortable doing the application in Spanish, that's available to them. We'll talk about resources in a second, but we have translated materials you can order through 12th year. Use the term financial aid nights. Avoid terms FAFSA nights. I actually Google search FAFSA night Washington in October, and I pull all the schools that have FAFSA nights, and I just reach out gently. Hey, I'm really excited that you're doing a financial aid event. Like, having access is critical. You can expand that access by calling your FAFSA night a financial aid night, and that would be more inclusive of the WAFSA, and I'd be happy to talk to you about it. And so I try to reach out that way. Partnering with your PTOs and parents or guardians, when we're talking about action planning and who we want to involve in this, sometimes training PTOs and doing parent-to-parent training has been really helpful in our communities. And then identifying who your trusted sources on college campuses are going to be for specific programs. Who are we going to refer the counselors to for this work if they have questions? And then other resources, United We Dream, the Northwest Immigrants' Rights Project, and the Beyond 1079 conference is also another wonderful resource. Again, we know that you guys are not going to be experts in this work, but that's okay, because we just want someone to help students navigate this process. All these little sticking points can be confusing, and it's that straw that can break the camel's back for a student. I know for me, if a financial aid officer didn't sit down with me and put me on a computer and help me through my first application, again, I would have not applied for aid. So I know that that 5-minute investment of someone's time and them just putting me on the right website and telling me, I'm here if you have questions, come and get me. That 5-minute investment changed the trajectory of my life. I know we're doing the same thing for other students. So it's okay if you're not an expert. You just need to know where to go when you go beyond your capacity. So resources. For the 12th year campaign, we are a program that works with high schools and their partners to provide free training and materials. These include translated materials. We have college knowledge books that walk students through freshman through senior year, all the tasks they need to do to prepare for college, as well as our junior senior workbooks that align with the with OSPI's High School and Beyond plan. So it has activities to help them prepare for their application, their junior senior year. The college knowledge books are in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, Somali, and Russian. They are printed in English and Spanish, so we can send you English and Spanish copies. The flash drive key that we will be sending you, and if you are listening to this after the webinar and you want to request it, you can always email us and request a flash drive. They'll be preloaded on there. We have postcards, we have trainings, a lot of ways for you to help. If you're working at a college and you're like, well, how do I use these materials? You have a couple options. If you're doing a financial aid event at your school, we are happy to promote your event through our website and through our statewide map of services. So that way we can reach out to schools and let them know, hey, did you know that this community college is having a financial aid event this week, and you can send your students there. Even if they're not planning on going to that school, they're happy to talk to them about financial aid. So that's very helpful as well. You can also order those materials for your own events. You can look at our FAFSA completion portal. This is a portal that gives high school counselors who have signed agreements access to student-specific data on financial aid completion. It tells them if those students has completed an application, completed an error with errors, or not completed it at all. You will have access as college members to the aggregate data where you can see if there are schools in your service area that maybe have lower financial aid completion rates than you're used to. So you maybe can support those schools knowing, hey, this is a feeder school. Their numbers are low. How can we best support those students, especially since we know we're going to have those students coming to our school? We also have our student loan advocate. So when I talked about being in deferment, loan discharges, the public service loan forgiveness program. If anyone has questions, anyone, I mean students, us, anyone, if you have questions about this process, Stephanie San Pedro is there to help you with the process and answer questions, and here's her contact information. Feel free to share that with students who are in these processes right now too. And then OtterBot.
New this year, we have a new digital platform that students can plug into called OtterBot. It's a free texting service that they can receive information through about important dates and deadlines, as well as a resource they can just ask questions to any time of day to receive help with financial aid. They can use the phone number provided and Hi Otter for a quick survey, and then they'll receive messages throughout the academic year about financial aid. If you guys need more information on OtterBot, you can visit wasac.wa.gov/OtterBot. On that website, there are also promotional flyers that you guys can print out and distribute to those who are interested in the platform.
Thank you. So we know that to do this work, it's going to take some planning. So before this webinar, you were sent out an action planning page. In this work, we're going to have you guys do some action planning. And to do that, we know that we're not going to do it live today while we have the webinar for action planning. We know that you're maybe not with your teams right now, but the first step for action planning is going to be determining who needs to be around for your action plan. Who are you going to incorporate in this process? Who from your school needs to know about this work? How are you going to cross-train across your campus, and then how are you going to cross-train in your community? So it's really determining who those teams are going to be first. For this process and training navigators, we want you guys to practice and get to know the content and resources available. Just knowing what's out there helps so much. If you're doing a financial aid night and you don't want to create a presentation, we have one created for you. You can actually send it to the high school counselors if you can't make it to an event. We even have it pre-recorded, so all they have to do is hit play, and it talks about financial aid, types of aid, and how to apply. Partnering with, if you're not part of your financial aid office at your school, partner with your financial aid office, and doing cross-training and setting that up is really awesome. We found that one-stop teams and other programs partnering with financial aid to expand capacity has worked really well. So identifying those other staff members on your campus, and if you have multiple campuses, what is that going to look like? Identifying your schools and organizations that are doing this work. Maybe you're going to invite your high school partners to campus and you're going to do a Financial Aid 101 navigation training for them. Or maybe you're going to promote the spring workshops that we're doing for the high school counselors later this spring. You know, maybe it's that you want to be on a panel for some of those workshops, or maybe you want to send out invitations to your high school partners as well as your community-based organizations. And then your own ideas in this work. So we know that you guys are going to share out your plans. I know some of you have already worked on plans before this because you got your documents, and I know we have the chat feature open. So if anyone wants to share any of the plans or things that they're thinking about doing right now, feel free to type it into the chat box and we'll share with the group for you. None? Okay. I know that some people pre-planned and worked on stuff ahead of time, and it's okay if you haven't. We want you to use those planning sheets. No matter what, you're all a part of Aim Higher Washington. This work is not going to be done by one person. I know I've had plenty of sleepless nights because financial aid numbers aren't going in the direction I want, thinking I'm going to be the one person that's going to make that needle move. And I know others put that weight on themselves too at financial aid offices, and that's not the case. We all are going to do this work to help students understand the opportunities that Washington's providing them, and so that we increase those financial aid numbers. So right now, you know, last year we were 48th in the nation for financial aid completion, and we're really excited about being able to move that needle for Washington State. Oh, and we have someone who's added in.
So it looks like some folks are deciding to make a departmental sign stating that you need to verify your phone number and email on your FAFSA application, probably likely to make sure students are receiving information.
Awesome. So that's a perfect one of like something that you can do even, you know, pretty quickly, is just making some informational signage to help students understand the importance of accurate information, updating their information. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And if you're looking for other resources, don't feel that you have to create the wheel on your own. We'll be sending you those keys with resources on them, but if you're looking for a specific resource, you're like, oh my gosh, I actually need a financial aid, just the FAFSA line by line. Just email me. I might already have created some of these resources you're looking for, and I'm happy to share them. We're all doing the same work. We shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel when we're doing this. So you're all part of Aim Higher Washington. You will get a package in the mail here in the next couple weeks with your flash drive and your certificate that you've completed the Train the Trainer. Does anyone have any questions? We definitely had a lot less questions than in our in-person workshop, so we are going to be finishing early today. If you have any questions, here is all of our resources. Feel free to reach out to us. Thank you so much for being here today. If anyone else has questions, if not, thank you for being here. Thank you for your interest in financial aid. We're so excited to have you join us. If there's anything we can do to help you with this process, please feel free to reach out. We're all doing this together. And have a wonderful day.